and thanks for joining us today for the Limited Submissions webinar. As I mentioned before, my name is Carlos Moncada, Director of Client Services at InfoReady. So this is the next installment of our Talking Shop webinar series. I'm happy to welcome our two panelists today, Daniel Mosky from the University of Arizona and Sherry Thompson from George Washington University.
Hello.
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello.
Good morning. Morning. Thanks you two for sharing how your institutions manage the limited submissions processes. InfoReady is hosting the webinar and the topic, but the topic is bigger than just the InfoReady portion. So our panelists today will really talk about the full process at their institution, so you can see what the full life cycle looks like from the perspective of your peers. So do you want to just share a little bit about the logistics and the schedule today, and share a little bit about InfoReady? So the webinar today is scheduled for 60 minutes. So the first few minutes, as you can see, is intro, and there'll then be about 25 minutes for our two panelists to share their presentations, and then we'll have about 30 minutes for Q&A. Following the webinar, we'll also have a brief 15-minute overview of and demo of InfoReady Review. So if you wanted to stick around, by all means, stick around and check out a demo of InfoReady Review that will be done by our very own Max Steinerman. And if you wanted to view the webinar again or share it with colleagues, the webinar recording is being recorded and will be available on our website next week. Just a couple reminders. The phones are muted, and if you have any questions, please submit those via the chat option. So most of you are familiar with InfoReady and InfoReady Review, but if you aren't, we focus on higher ed. So our software is the market-leading software for automating competition, review, and approval processes. It's used heavily in offices of research at universities throughout the country, and even a few international universities. And InfoReady can automate a large chunk of the busy work for you. Saving hours and hours of time. We've had someone measured it, and they said it saved them 95% of their time on a competition, on a few competitions. No, that's not everyone, right? It's going to vary per institution, but it's kind of just an example of the power of the system. And if you're wondering what InfoReady does, here's a quick list. And it's a cloud-based tool, right? So multiple people can go to a centralized place to submit, manage, and review competitions. It's also a good way for disseminating opportunities, collecting and reviewing applications, routing materials and applications for review and approval. You can even make the awards and track outcomes there, do all the communication, and even generate real-time reports. So there's a lot of different ways people use the system. You can see a list of some of those ways here. The one we're focusing on today is limited submissions. And with that, I'll introduce Dan Mosky, who's a program manager for research development services at University of Arizona. So one of his major responsibilities is the limited submissions process for the university. He works in the central office. And you can see he has several other responsibilities as all of these on the phone do, right? You're always all wearing multiple hats. Dan wears multiple hats. One of the big hats he wears, his 15-gallon hat, is limited submissions. So with that, I will turn it over to Dan. Take it away, Dan.
Okay, thank you, Carlos. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Sherry. Thank you all for joining us today. And I'm happy to present our limited submissions process here at the University of Arizona. This is something that's sort of an ongoing process for us as more and more limiteds occur and as we learn of new ways to manage them. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So our office is Research Development Services. We're a central research development office for the university, supporting our researchers and scholars in proposal development. We also do some programming with seminars and workshops. Different universities may have different shops or different ways of managing limited submissions, but here at U of A, we are the central office responsible for that. Next slide. This is just a bit about what our office handles. We're a service department, so we help faculty craft winning proposals. And then, as Carlos said, one of our main areas of responsibility are managing the limited submissions process. Next slide. So what types of limited submissions do we manage? We manage institutionally limited submission opportunities such as honors and awards or limits that a sponsor puts on per organization or institution. And I guess that would be a good opportunity to actually define what a limited submission is, which is a funding opportunity where the funder has limited the number of applications from an organization in some way. What we don't manage is limited opportunities where there's a limit on the number of applications per PI, for example. We rely on the PI to know whether they've put in more than one application or not. Generally, our preferred timeline is to ID and publicize limited submissions about 12 weeks before the funder's deadline, and hopefully have identified our institutional ticket about 8 weeks prior so that the applicant has plenty of time to write their full proposal. For more complex or large proposals, we may work months in advance. For example, the recent NSF MERSEC solicitation, we're currently running an internal competition that closes in January, and the proposal isn't due to NSF until next June. So we try not to be thought of as the gatekeeper. We want to think of ourselves as facilitators to help the U of A put their best foot forward where all of these limited submissions are concerned. Next slide. So a big part of my role is trying to discover limited opportunities. There's a variety of ways we do that. One of the key ones that I use is Pivot, which is an online searchable database of available external funding, and it lists all of the opportunities that are limited. It's tagged with a limited notation. You can see there in our U of A colors, it's tagged in bright red, so it's hard to miss. So I have a search set up that helps me find all limited opportunities. Pivot's the closest thing I've found to finding a template for popular or recurring programs because it tags deadlines up to 3 years in advance. Next slide. Here are some other ways to discover limited opportunities. One of the best is to sign up for different agency newsletters. As I noted there, NSF has an actual option that you could sign up for solicitations that limit the number of proposals an organization can submit. It's also good, I follow several of our peer institutions to try to catch things that other people may have seen that I haven't seen. And then we make sure we publicize our process so that everyone on campus, if they if they find a limited that we haven't seen, they should bring that to our attention so that we can put it into our process. And then we keep a record of all of the previous programs since those repeat, and I'll cover in a minute how we keep track of that. Next slide. A special area of limited submissions that we have recently added a staff member for here at U of A is honors and awards. This is we have a new associate, Carol Brody, who helps to identify these opportunities and helps our U of A faculty to apply. A lot of times honors and awards overlap with limited submissions, so sometimes there will be a competition for these particular honors and awards. Next slide. So I use Asana, which is an online project management software tool to manage our limited submissions workflow. On screen is the list view of my limited submissions projects, and I'm a list guy, a checklist guy, so it's really great for that. It keeps a record of everything that's in process and coming up, and you can assign different team members to different tasks, and everything can be date driven. I know some colleagues that also use Trello. That's kind of a personal preference, which tool works best for you. Next slide. This is just another example of Asana. You can also use a board view, and I use this for sort of a quick visual overview of what's coming up. You can see there I have columns heading out into next year, and actually those columns go all the way to the right out to 2020. So that gives me kind of a quick overview of what's coming up, and then it's also good for my team members here in RDS to be able to look in and see what may be coming that they're needing to be involved in, or if I'm out on vacation or sick or something, someone else can see what's coming up. Next slide. I really like Asana for tracking our workflow. This is just another view. It's the timeline view, which kind of shows how many different opportunities can be running concurrently. So this is just another way to see what's currently in process, and who can argue with color coding. I'm a big fan of that, so it makes it really helpful. Next slide. This is a little more detail on the workflow for each limited submissions. You can assign really detailed task lists, and so I've broken down every limited from opportunity identification through the competition, through review, to awarding the ticket and closing it out and tracking it for the next iteration. So as I said, I'm a checklist guy, so this is a phenomenal tool for me. And it also then gives me a record of when I did certain tasks, so that for future iterations, if we need to add more time or maybe make things a little a different timeline, I can adjust that for future versions of particular limited submissions. Next slide. So we announce all of the limited submissions through our weekly newsletter that's called The Current. This is a publicly available newsletter, and anyone's welcome to sign up to receive that. We've designed it to be mobile friendly, and it links people directly into InfoReady's competition space, or to our website, or to the sponsor's website as needed, so they can get more information or move forward with applying for a limited submission. Next slide. So we use InfoReady Review for all of our internal competitions, and one of the nice features that it incorporates is it plays nice with Pivot. So there's an option to push to InfoReady any listing that's in Pivot, which lets me import all of the information about a particular listing straight into a competition, and that saves a ton of time and reduces cutting and pasting or typos or other errors like that. I highly recommend it if your university has a subscription to Pivot as well as InfoReady. Next slide. So we use InfoReady Review to facilitate all of our internal competitions. As Carlos put up earlier, there's a lot of great features for the software, and we really couldn't manage without it, honestly. It's fantastic as a central location for all of our competitions. It standardizes everything, so our faculty, know where to look. It's browser-based, it's cloud-based, so that's great for faculty when they're traveling. And it helps us manage the entire process, including reporting at the end of the process, if that's a requirement. Next slide. This is just a quick overview, I guess, of one competition as it's built up. We try to use text boxes to simplify the applications for our faculty, but they could also do different attachments as necessary. And we try our best to sort of mirror the requirements of the solicitation. So we minimize the pre-proposal for the faculty member and basically ask them to create maybe shorter versions of what they might have to create anyways, were they to go forward with the institutional ticket. And it's all, live links within that as well, so you can link people back to our website or to the sponsor's website. Next slide. Now we also do all of our reviewing within InfoReady Review. This slide, shows the reviewer's screen. It gives a lot of great flexibility in your review criteria, and you can download all of the information into Excel for analysis. At U of A, we use ad hoc reviewers, review volunteers, and then PIs who have been awarded internal funding or a limited submission ticket to be reviewers. So that's sort of one of the major challenges we face at U of A is finding reviewers since we don't have review panels set up here. We try to locate potential viewers for upcoming programs in advance wherever possible. Next slide. And finally, for once the limiteds have run their course, I like Asana for tracking the workflow, but I use good old Excel to kind of keep a general overview of everything that has been happening. As you can see, limited submissions are increasing. We're sort of on pace to double the number that we've tracked or run in 2018 versus 2017. And I use, this Excel as a nice way to track our metrics for presentations to department heads or university leadership, and keeping track. It also helps me keep track of which sponsors are adding more and more limited submissions. Next slide. Finally, our website has our limited submissions table. This is, public searchable database of all the limited submissions that RDS has managed, and we identified the PI who was awarded the institutional ticket. So we do that for transparency, and I know there's some pros and cons for keeping the identities of limited submissions applicants private. We've tried to strike kind of a middle ground where we identify who receives the tickets, but we don't really list who else applied. We leave that up to faculty to communicate with their colleagues regarding how to strengthen their submission. And then, our staff is also available to help strengthen future applications. On this site, you can also sign up to be a reviewer. So we use that as a way to get volunteers to help us with our review process. Next slide. And this is just a quick graph from my Excel spreadsheet just showing how much limited submissions are increasing. You can really see how funding agencies are sort of offloading some of their review process to institutions by putting limits on the number of applications. And I really don't see any reason why this won't continue to increase. Next slide. And this is just our team here at RDS. We have a great team of experts, and we're all very happy to discuss any parts of what we do to help faculty, and I'm more than happy to discuss our limited submissions process, or so feel free to contact me offline. I'm always learning and adapting, so I'm happy to talk to anyone, and that concludes my portion of the limited submissions presentation today. Thank you. Off to you, Sherry.
Dan, thanks so much for that. We've got quite a few questions, and we'll be asking you those questions during the Q&A portion.
Fantastic.
Now I'd like to introduce Sherry Thompson from George Washington University. As you can see, she has a background in microbiology, biomedical research, so she's and just research administration. So she has quite a bit of experience in probably in a lot of what you already do. Sherry also wears a lot of hats, and she'll be talking about her limited submissions hat today.
Thank you, Carlos. Hello, everyone. I'm glad you could join me today. Next slide. Again, I work for the George Washington University here in snowy Washington, D.C. in the Mid-Atlantic region. Next slide, please. I'm going to be brief and not go over a lot of things that you just heard from Dan, but I want to bring out little nuances that we do here at George Washington that Dan's university may not do. Now, how do I identify limited opportunities? George Washington has a historical Excel spreadsheet of all the limited submissions that they generally post. To date, I believe there's 65. And I don't really use this the way they used to years ago, but it really does come in handy. I have a listing of all the ones that they do like to post and announce. But what I really like about this spreadsheet is that I'm able to sort by the proposal deadline as well as whether an institutional invitation is required. And so I can sort by that and post accordingly. And what I also like about this spreadsheet, which I incorporated, when I find one that I want to post, I actually post it through InfoReady, and I make a note that I do have a template in InfoReady so I don't have to build it a second time. Next slide, please. Like Dan, I also rely on pivot.cost.com. I have saved search for limited opportunity. It's saved and it sends me either new limited submissions opportunities or updated every week. So I'm able to revise my InfoReady site based upon that, or I can interrogate the site to find other opportunities that I think the university might find interesting. Now I also find out limited opportunities through the Office of Corporate Relations Foundation. They also need to post institution-wide, so they will come up with a little template of information for these more esoteric foundation opportunities that a PI wants to apply to, and then I will post that opportunity in InfoReady on their behalf. That's as much as I do for them. Once the application is submitted, I forward it to them, and I'm pretty much out of the picture at that point. So I use the spreadsheet, I use Pivot, I have the Office of Corporation Relations and Foundations, and I also will on occasion receive an email or phone call from a PI who says, oh, I found an opportunity I want. Can you publish this because it's limited? So I do that as well. Next slide, please. What I like about pivot.com is that they identify, as Dan said, what are the limited competitions with the bar that says limited, as well as opportunities that have some type of internal coordination required. I will post those in InfoReady if they are an institutional award that really does require some type of internal coordination. But I do like that it certainly highlights it right off the bat. And for my example today, since Pew was there on the screen, I decided to pull up my last Pew competition and show you screenshots from that. So next slide, please. In Pivot, if you click on Pew, there are a lot of things that you find interesting. First of all, it describes what the limitation of that funding opportunity is. It gives you great detail. And of course, for those of us who know about Pew, this is a nomination limitation and it's by invitation only. And what's important about that is we do Pew every year. We are lucky to receive an invitation every year, but I cannot post it until that invitation is received. You certainly don't want to assume you're going to receive an invitation and have PIs submitting applications and then we don't receive one. So I track very closely when that invitation is received to the university, at which time I will publish the opportunity in InfoReady. And of course, this is something we tend to do annually, so I track it in Pivot. You can see it's tracked at the upper right-hand corner in red. And what I really like about Pivot is that at the bottom, you can add yourself a date reminder or a note. And so for limited submissions that do require an invitation, I always make a note, check for invitation, probably about 3 months before the sponsor submission date, in case I forget, because we do several of these. And then like Dan, I of course have the ability to push the opportunity to InfoReady. Next slide, please. Once I'm in InfoReady, I have to build a competition. And of course, because I pushed the opportunity from Pivot, a lot of the information is pre-populated. However, the part that really takes me time to think about and plan out are the timelines. I tend to save that until last in case there is more internal coordination that needs to be had. Say, for instance, if there's faculty announcements that's sent to the department, we want to make sure all the information in terms of dates and times and what's needed is the same information. We don't want to have it scattered about, say the department comes up with their own and then I have a different timeline. So we definitely coordinate those efforts. So that's between me, my boss, the director of the Office of Sponsored Projects, as well as the director of communications in my larger office, which is the Office of the Vice President of Research. So I tend to save that section for last, and it's definitely finalized before I launch the competition. Next slide, please. Next slide. Oh, I'm sorry, slide before that. I apologize. I blinked when you changed it, so I missed it. Another area that to me is very important when I build a competition is where I upload all the competition files. I always upload the official sponsor funding opportunity. If there's a fact sheet that they have available, I upload that as well. And then I also, for those large competitions, if the departments are going to put this information in their newsletters and we do faculty announcements through the departments, I will make a PDF of that announcement and I will upload that as well. And any templates that might be required for them to apply, like the key personnel, a budget, whatever the case may be. So that area is very important for outreach to the PI so they know exactly in a glance what is needed for this competition. Next slide. Again, once the competition is completely finalized, this is where it's announced. At the same time, the Office of Communications in OVPR, which is the Office of the Vice President of Research, they send out newsletters and they send out updates. And of course, if departments are putting this information in their newsletters, they have the same information that you would find if you were on the InfoReady homepage. And everything is hyperlinked back to InfoReady. There's no PI that can apply for a limited submission and not come to the InfoReady site. Everyone's on board, but that is the one place you need to go. Next slide, please. Competition details. This is a very important part that you really need to consider before you launch a competition. The parts that I have highlighted is where I develop effective timelines by working backwards, which means I start with the sponsor proposal submission date, and I work backwards from there, particularly with something like PIRE or MRI that might need some collaboration and coordination. I really need to work on this and get it out soon so PIs can start communicating, building, discussing what they might need or want. So I work backwards from the sponsor's due date. And as you can see from there, then I do when the application is, of course, due to the sponsor. I do when the Office of the Vice President of Research will review all the applications for internal approval. So these are the full applications. They need a specific amount of time to do that. So that's clearly stated, as well as backwards from there, when we notify, if there's a notification like in Pew, when that has to be made, period, and back from there, when GW will make the nominee decision. We issue a notice to proceed at the end of the competition for that one applicant that will represent the institution. And then, of course, back from there, how long will the internal review of any applications will take place? It might be 1 week, it might be 2 weeks. And then back from there, when the preliminary application is due into InfraReady. And of course, back from there, when the competition is actually open. So I really think about it and work backwards. And again, if there's things that need to be coordinated with the Department of Communications or departments, this is where it all begins. So we all sign off on these timelines, and that's what gets put out to the research public. Next slide, please. Now, I want to get a little more into the review process. I am a one-stop shop. I'm the person here on campus that teaches InfraReady. I run InfraReady. So I'm the person who will do the initial cursory review of applications once that competition is closed. There are certain documents I always ask for: the abstract, their CV. I might ask for the budget. I ask for a project summary, which may only be 2 to 3 pages. I do not require them to submit the full number of pages that will be needed for a full application. That would be cruel. So I definitely get those. And there are, I follow the restrictions that the sponsor has stated for formatting and page limits, and it has to be a PDF font, etc. I do the administrative review to make sure all the applications fit within those parameters. If before the competition is closed and I happen to be reviewing and something isn't quite right, then I have the ability through InfraReady to reject that application. I send the PI a note: you need to check your margins. This is the wrong font. Please revise and resubmit. If I find something like that occurs after the competition is closed, then that application does not get reviewed, and they are notified that their application is rejected through InfraReady. That makes it very simple. Another thing, before you actually assign reviewers for the applications that do fall within the defined parameters, you have to accept them. And InfraReady is very handy in that you can do this through batch. You can look at all your applications. You can click the little box that will tick all the applications that you want to accept, and you just simply click accept. At this point, you can have the PI notified that their application has been accepted to go into review, or you don't have to notify the PIs. I notify them so they know if their application is going to be reviewed on based on technical merit. So this review process that you see on the screen looks like it's from Pew, and this is the routing for that review process. When you do a review, you have to build your scorecard. This is when you're routing through InfraReady. You have to build your routing sheet and what are the parameters that you're routing with. If there's a score for innovation of an application, for broader impact, or the PICV, are they qualified, things of that nature, you have to build that and make a rating system accordingly. Once that is done, what I do is when applications come in, I look at their, I always ask them for 5 keywords to describe their application. I'll see what the expertise is. I might assign one reviewer that has similar expertise, and then the rest I just kind of pull out of my database of reviewers. We do have that here at GW. We have faculty who sign on for 2 years to be internal reviewers, and this is part of their job as being members of the Advisory Council on Research for the university. So I have about 40 faculty that have signed up to do reviews, which is easy for me to do. So then I can assign reviewers. I try to do 3 to 5 per application, and through InfoReady, they receive an email, they receive the application, they receive my the scoring criteria, and they can read it and score it, and this is the outcome of that, which I totally love. Another thing you can do with this is you can delete a reviewer if you need to. The one thing about reviewers that I think a lot of people are surprised at how much time it takes to do that, and that is because you might have people who need to recuse themselves because they might be married to the applicant. They may not have the same last name. That has happened to me many times. They might be away on sabbatical and you may not know it for a little bit. That happens as well. But I fortunately have a pool that I can replace one reviewer with another. When I do open competitions, I do make a field where applicants can enter names of reviewers who they think should be recused from seeing their application for a myriad of reasons. It's usually not something bad, but there may be some type of relationship there that I don't know. So that's always good to know. Next slide, please. I'm going to hurry and get through these so we can have Q&A. Lastly are your notifications. Once all the reviews are in and it's been scored and sanctioned from bosses above as to who will represent the institution or who will be awarded, I send all my notifications through InfoReady again. For those who are not lucky to be moving forward or being nominated, their applications need to be rejected. And I do this through the notification process. One thing I really love about InfoReady is when someone submits an application, a system will generate a unique identifier number. We use that very number since it's system generated and we don't have to come up with the system ourselves. We use that number throughout our application tracking life cycle. No matter what office wants me to send them the application, that's the number that is identified for them to track this particular application, whether it's funded, whatever the case may be. So I'm very happy that InfoReady does generate these unique numbers that we can use for our internal purposes as well. Secondly, when you do send out notifications, you do have the option to have the reviewer's comments included in that notification through mail merge. They have a lot of mail merge that saves you a lot of time in putting application titles in putting applicant's name, again, the comments, feedback. And whenever you do the reviews through mail merge, all the reviewers' names are anonymized. It's just reviewer 1, 2, 3. Even though you as a manager would know who the reviewers are, were you to download all the information, you actually know who they are, and since you assigned them, you should. So that's very, very helpful. We, for those who do move forward or get awarded, we have customized the notifications with our letterhead, which is quite nice. So you always have that option to do that. And what we have now started to do internally through many offices is we are downloading the information entered at InfoReady, be it at the application point or the review point, for business offices to interrogate that information and come up with metrics that they can give to their to the heads up to track how many applicants we had, were they successful, things of that nature. And so we are doing that more often in the report section of InfoReady, which is really, really quite helpful because that means I really don't have to do anything. The business office does that. And we're able to circulate the same information throughout the myriad of offices that want to interrogate it. That's it. Oh, I did that fast. I tried to get done so we could have time for Q&A.
Thanks so much, Sherry. Really appreciate it. So now we're to the Q&A portion, and we've gotten quite a few questions. Let's get started. Let's dive in.
Okay.
Great. So the first question came up during Dan's presentation, and this person asked, do you have to manually add all of these limited submissions into Asana, or can you pull these from Pivot into Asana to auto-populate?
Right now, I manually enter them. Asana does integrate with a variety of different softwares. I don't think it integrates with Pivot at this point, but I've created some templates that have all of my steps for each different opportunity. So essentially, what I'm importing is the name of the opportunity and the URL, and then most everything else is just standardized on the template. So it's not a lot of manual entry. I just am duplicating a template each time.
Thanks, Dan. Here's a question for both of you, and it's in the same vein. Are any of the tools you use integrated with the other tools? So you answered part of that for Asana and Pivot.
And now you all have integrated Cayuse 424 and the other, I believe that's integrated in Pivot, correct?
Yeah.
Is Cayuse integrated with Pivot, or?
So, it's my understanding that they have.
Okay. So Cayuse 424 is for internal routing, for external, applications.
And then actually, InfoReady is in the midst of working on a project to integrate InfoReady Review with some of the Cayuse tools.
Okay.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, we here at GW, we have a pre-award integrated systems training where we talk about the integration of Cayuse with InfoReady with Pivot and how they actually inform each other in many ways and can be used for that function.
Oh, great. And, as you both mentioned, both of you use the integration between Pivot and InfoReady Review already.
Yes.
And then we also use, the download to Excel feature out of InfoReady as well.
Right.
Great. Now, another integration question. This one's for Dan. Is your newsletter, the current, a custom tool? And can you say more about it, such as how does it integrate with Pivot, if it does?
So we use MailChimp to create the newsletter. I mean, the layout was done by a graphic designer. Right now, it's not integrated with Pivot or with Asana. That's one of my tasks in my Asana checklist, is to try to make that a more automated feature. I know there are some other newsletter softwares out there, such as Emma or Constant Contact, and long term, I want to investigate some of those for precisely that reason, for their integration. But right now, it's more a feature of me building out the newsletter each week. And with limited submissions, the way we advertise them, they have we try to give as much a long lead time as possible. So frequently I will add a new opportunity to a newsletter, and then I can just replicate that newsletter for the following, whatever it is, 2 or 3 weeks, without having to cut and paste it in again. So that would be my answer to that.
Thanks, Dan. Here's a question for the two of you. And Sherry, you kind of alluded to this during your presentation. How do you manage conflicts of interest with reviewers within InfoReady?
Well, I don't assign them to be reviewers. I build a field, a text field, and I ask the question, enter the names of reviewers who should be recused. And people do. And so when I assign reviewers, before I actually hit, send to the reviewers, I definitely check those to make sure that I haven't assigned one of our reviewers who needs to be recused to that application. Another thing I do, if one of our reviewers is actually an applicant, which has happened, I don't allow them to review any of the applications. But again, I have a large pool that I can take from in terms of reviewers, not only internally, but externally. We have consultants who work remotely. And when I need external GW reviewers, some PIs request that, then I send it to the consultants. So I definitely have to look at my list. And it's only happened maybe twice that I had to recuse someone, and it was because they were married to the applicant and their last names were different. I never would have known that unless they actually had indicated it.
And, we, at U of A, we sort of have done both ways, I guess. For an internal competition, we've asked we've asked applicants to suggest potential reviewers, and then use that as sort of a guideline for who should review. But otherwise, we just sort of do our best to only assign reviewers that are outside of the applicant's department, for example, to minimize conflicts of interest. When we request someone to review, we make a point of stating in the email that if they have a conflict of any kind, that they need to be sure to bring that to our attention. So we sort of do our best to identify conflicts that way. And then also we try to ask most of our applicants to write in a way that it is not using jargon, so that it could be understandable to a more general audience, and that way that kind of opens up potential reviewers as well. So those are sort of the ways that, since we don't have the standing review panels, those are some of the ways that we try to minimize conflicts of interest.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Sherry. Next question for you. How quick is your review and turnaround for internal competition decisions? And who does internal competition reviews for limited submissions?
So we try to do, as I mentioned in the presentation, we try to identify things 12 weeks out. It's a sort of similar timeline for internal competitions. We try to have all of our reviews completed within 2 weeks, the end of the competition. That sometimes depends on the complexity of the particular internal program or the limited submission. What was the second part of that question, Carlos?
And who does the internal competition reviews for limited submissions?
Right. So we follow a sort of similar policy we have identified reviewers ahead of time, depending on the competition. And then there's, university leadership may also review as well, but it's mostly, faculty and peer review that handles it.
Yes, that's similar with my institution. We have peer review, faculty to review. Another thing that I like about InfoReady in terms of how, about setting time frames for getting this completed is that you have the ability to send reminders to reviewers. If you're giving them 2 weeks to do a review, after the end of the first week, if they haven't submitted their reviews, you can send them a reminder that it's due next week, which is really lovely. And also, of course, with InfoReady, when a review is completed, I can set it up such that I receive an email that a review is completed. I don't do that because we do a lot of reviews, so I'd have a lot of emails. I just go through my field and see what's definitely submitted, but I used to.
And just to add, I completely agree with Sherry on that. The review reminders are fantastic, and the way it's sent to reviewers is as an email with links to the different applications. So you're not emailing, PDF files all over the place. You're just sending them a very concise email that's very user-friendly for them to go in and do their review using the InfoReady cloud-based system.
To Dan's point, why we forgot to mention, yes, when you use InfoReady, the applications are automatically sent to reviewers. You don't have to do anything. If an application is in the system and you've assigned it to a certain person, that person will receive an email. There's an application waiting for your review. Now, of course, the reviewer will have been expecting this application for review, because before I assign them through InfoReady, I send a notification to all the reviewers. This competition is coming up. I'd like for you to review. If you're having any time conflicts, please let me know before I assign you. So they're ready for this email. So they just click the link, the application opens, the scorecard, and they do their review. And they hit submit and it's over. Or save as draft. They have that option as well.
Thank you. Here's a question regarding applicant identity. Can you discuss the pros and cons of keeping the identities of limited submission applicants private?
Well, this is a challenging area, and as I kind of mentioned in the presentation, we tried to find sort of a middle ground where we put the applicants who received the ticket are identified publicly, so that there's some transparency in the system. Some of the pros of publicizing who the applicants are is, the goal of the limited submission is to put your best team forward. So if you would identify all the applicants, there's a chance that they could, work together to submit an even stronger pre-proposal or proposal than they would have had they been, anonymous to each other. We haven't gone down that road right now, but I can see the pros of that. The cons of that, of course, is that then you're introducing a lot of different faculty careers and a lot of different levels of expertise in who can apply for different things. Sherry, did you have anything you wanted to add there?
Yes, that is completely out of my purview. I do not announce who gets the notice to proceed. I do not publish who applied, not for limited submissions. For internal competitions, for intramurals, that's different. We publish who wins and their school and department, etc. But if a faculty member wanted to know that information, then they would more than likely contact the vice president of research in a meeting or something, and to find out. So I leave that for them to decide whether it's a pro or a con to do such.
Thank you. So we only have a few more minutes left, so I think we may have time for one, possibly two questions. So here goes. How do you select which limited submission opportunities to run, and what's the best way to identify upcoming limited submission programs as far in advance as possible?
I'll run as many as, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
I run as many opportunities as I like, because faculty come and go. You never know who's here. You never know who might be interested in something. Even if I'm not anticipating any applications, it's posted for GW to see. We want to do that in the event that someone comes and says, you know what, I wanted to apply for such and such, and I never saw it. Well, InfoReady tracks all this, so we can say, well, we published it during this period of time, and I'm sorry you missed it. So I try to publish everything from the spreadsheet as I will. Of course, the popular ones that are broadly disseminated from the deans, the ADRs, everyone, we all know about those. Those get published well in advance. So I just publish them whether anyone wants to apply or not, because it's so quick and simple when you just push it from Pivot into InfoReady. And I really make it pretty much a skeleton where it's not a huge thing to load up or to apply for, because chances are I'm not going to get any applications, but it's there.
Right, yeah, I completely agree, Sherry. We do a similar approach. You know, Pivot, I think, is the best tool for tracking things long-term, as well as, you know, just sort of building your, list of repeating opportunities. And we do something similar where if we have, historical data or, just staff knowledge that particular limiteds are not going to be that popular, instead of setting up a full competition in InfoReady, we'll create sort of just a very basic expression of interest where someone just only needs to submit, sort of a quick 250-word summary of what they want to do. And that sort of minimizes the workload on our staff, me in particular, but it also, we've run that limited in case there is a faculty member that we didn't know about who may be interested in it. And then it's, fits into our full, timeline and process to make sure everything is, publicly announced to the university.
Oh, Dan, I love that idea. In addition to that, in the program description, I think I'm going to have a statement that says, if you would like to apply for this, please contact, me, so I can definitely build out the competition. That's a wonderful idea. I like that.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it seems
well. We've got a minute left. We've not enough time to ask another question. I want to thank you two again for presenting how you manage limited submissions at your respective institutions. Once again, that's Dan from the University of Arizona and Sherry from George Washington University. If you see on screen here, I've put up their contact information if you wanted to reach out to them. One other reminder, we have recorded this session and we'll be posting it to our website within the next week or two. So if you ever wanted to share it or see it again, it'll be there, just a button click away. Now, that closes the limited submission webinar. We are doing about a 15-minute InfoReady review demo here with our very own Max Dinerman. So we'll give you about a 3 or 4 minute break if you wanted to use the restroom, and we'll be here waiting for you. Thanks very much for everyone who joined this part, and if you want to stick around and see the demo, we'll start that up in just a couple minutes.
Thanks, Carlos. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Carlos. Thanks, Sherry.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Bye.
Bye.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for sticking around for the demo of InfoReady Review. My name is Max Steinerman. I'm the Director of Product Sales at InfoReady, and I work mainly with folks in research development and sponsored programs. So what we're going to do today is just a very quick kind of 15-minute overview demo of the InfoReady Review solution for those of you that haven't seen it. And if you want any additional information, or want to see more, we'll provide my contact info to you after, at the end of the webinar here. All right. So InfoReady Review is a cloud-based solution that's used by offices of research and sponsored projects mainly to run limited submissions, internal competitions, really any kind of process where you're soliciting application data, intaking that data, and then managing the review process. And we believe strongly that in order for a solution to really be scalable and to really, be valuable, especially in a higher ed environment, it needs to be really easy to use, even from the administrative perspective, so that you're not training people over and over on how to use it. It needs to be easy to implement, and it needs to be easy to manage from a technical perspective. So if you use InfoReady, you won't have to engage any of your IT folks or anything like that to help you manage it, and the implementation takes a couple of weeks. About 150 universities in the United States use InfoReady, and most of those adopted it in the last 3.5 years. And our clients range in size and scope from the largest university system in the country all the way down to really small undergraduate schools. So without further ado, we'll get into the software here. So as you can see, this is my demo site. We'll be in this site for most of the demo, and that's why it's branded for InfoReady. All right, but just to kind of ground you, I'm going to show you what a live client instance of the site looks like. And so the site I just switched to is one of the University of Michigan's instances of InfoReady. And the page we're on right now is called the home page. So once you build an opportunity and the kind of associated workflow in InfoReady and you launch that opportunity, a listing for the opportunity is going to be placed on this home page. And we saw a little bit of this in the webinar as well. So if I'm a PI, I can just come to this page, click on one of these links, and it'll take me to essentially an RFP or a call for proposals here. If there's any guidelines or files that the admin wants me to use, like a budget template or anything like that, those are going to live under this competition files section here. And then if I want to submit my application for internal review, I just click apply. It'll ask me to log in there, and it'll take me to whatever the application requirements are for this particular opportunity. So in real time, what that kind of looks like just from the applicant's perspective is I'll click on this opportunity. It'll ask me to log in using my normal university single sign-on. What's your login? Sorry about that, we ran into some technical difficulties. So once I've logged in with my single sign-on as the applicant, it's just going to take me to the application requirements for this particular opportunity that the admin set up. Maybe they set it up as a template to be used with all similar kind of opportunities, but it's a very simple form for the applicant to fill out. As the admin, you can customize the fields and build in whatever fields you want in a number of different formats. And anything that the applicant enters in their application form is going to be reportable, and you can aggregate it and export it as a CSV. You can ask for file uploads, things like that. Reference letters, our system will automatically collect reference letters from third parties and collate them with applicants' applications, even if the applicant needs to be blind to those applications. You can also do things like gather prerequisite approvals, to qualify applications before they can move into your merit review. And then the applicant can just save and submit there. So once the applicant has submitted their application, as the admin, you can enter that competition to manage it here. It's going to take an extra second. So once the applicants submit their applications, I can come to my management tab, and this is showing me a list of all the open competitions that I manage. Or if you're a super admin here, you can just search through, find the opportunity that you want to manage, and very easily come in and track activity and kind of see where everything is in the review process. So this is my Fund 85 Award management tab here. And we can do a number of things from this tab, including sharing the opportunity, submitting an application as a proxy, things like that. But the real cockpit is the application grid. And we have two versions of the application grid, kind of depending on how you want to see this data. But what this is showing me is all the applications that have been submitted, who the applicant is, that unique app ID number that Sherry was talking about, and then wherever each application is in the review process that you set up for this particular opportunity or type of opportunity. So in this case, we had a chair approval and then a committee rubric with 3 metrics here, and then into a final committee approval and a final score stage, and then finally to the award. So I can track for all these proposals where they are in whatever review process I've set up very easily. I can also do things like sort and filter to view by response and things like that. For a scored step, like the second step in our routing process here, it's going to show me an average score for each metric on the rubric for each application. And then I can go ahead and sort or filter through to get my top scoring application, for example. And then I have a number of actions that I can do either in batch or individually for an application to move things along. So if I want to route in batch, I can just make a selection of applications and then a selection of which routing step I want to route them to, and then easily route my applications through the step. I can award, reject, can do all that in bulk or individually for an application. So that, hopefully that gives you a sense of how easy it is and how organized the solution is in terms of managing competitions. I'm going to kind of rewind now, and I'm going to show you how we would have created that workflow that we just saw in the competition management tab here. So if I'm an admin and I want to create and launch a competition, I can come over here to my Create tab. And if I've been using the system a while for some of my processes, I can actually just launch from a template that I've already saved that includes most of the information that I need here for my workflow, or I can just kind of start from scratch. And what we'll do is we'll build out the workflow here from soup to nuts, as I like to say, all the way from the call through our requirements and our routing process. We can customize the notifications that go out, the auto emails that go out to different stakeholders in the context of your process. And then we can even build out automated progress reports to be triggered once you make an award. And the system will automatically keep track of as many progress reports as you want once the applicant has been awarded and hopefully funded by the funding organization. So we're not going to go through this workflow in detail here just because of time, but I wanted to give you a sense of how everything's kind of split up. So the first step is we're going to enter all the info that's essentially going to generate our RFP. All right, and again, if you use Pivot, there's an integration that allows you to essentially just populate this tab, all this info directly from a Pivot listing. I can add any kind of fields that I want to this RFP by entering text there. I can also do things like change what the apply button says. So if apply is not, the word you want to use there, you can make it nominate or whatever you want. So it's extremely configurable. So once we've set up the details, we can set up our application requirements. And again, this is a very simple form builder. We give you a lot of fields that most folks need for funding opportunities. If I don't want to use these fields, I just click exclude. Otherwise, I can make them required or optional here. I can drag these and drop these. I can add notes to my applicants. And then I can add whatever requirements I want. So if I want to add a requirement, I can pick from these formats here. So I can ask for a date, I can build out a multiple choice question, I can build out a forced numerical entry, text box, text field, yes, no, or multi-select. So if you're an admin, whatever process you're running and whatever application forms you may be currently collecting, the system is flexible enough that you can really build out those custom forms very easily, and all the data, even if it's coming from a custom field that you built out, is going to be reportable and stored within the system. We can also ask for supporting documentation. We can set up things like that chair pre-approval, allow co-applicants, set limits on co-applicants, things like that. The third-party reference letter collection, which we saw at the beginning of the demo there, and then finally we can ask our applicants to tag their applications to a list of keywords that we've generated. Now we can set up our routing process, and what we're going to do is kind of set up the different buckets that all the applications either have to go through or might go through during the course of this process. So what I'm going to do now is just build a really simple rubric, and I'm going to call it committee scores. And let's say it's a 3-metric rubric, so what I'll do is I'll select a 3 comments and ratings combination. If you know who your reviewers are going to be already, you can enter their email addresses in this text box here separated by commas. Otherwise, you just scroll down here, and it's giving me the kind of template to build out my 3-metric rubric. So I have these 3 comment boxes and 3 rating scales that I can then kind of manipulate to get my actual rubric. So my first metric is feasibility. I can change that and then say, please score from 1 to 5 or whatever instructions I want to give to my reviewers. And then I can just edit the range to be 1 to 5 and move on to the next metric. And so if you're running limited submissions and all your routing processes or all your limited submission competitions have the same rubric, essentially, you can just come in here and build this rubric out as a template and then launch your next limited submission from this template, change whatever, data about the specific opportunity needs to be changed, but you're really only having to do most of this workflow work once. All right? We can also do things like unblind reviewers on a per-step basis to the identity of the applicant and kind of play with all these different rules on a per-step basis to really meet the privacy and kind of logistical needs that most offices of research face. So there's a lot of flexibility here. We don't have time to go into each one of these and to go into this in more detail, but hopefully this kind of gives you a sense of how we would build out that workflow. And then again, once we have actually launched our competition, and I'll just go back into my Fund 85 award here. Once we've actually launched that competition, now we have a lot of control over when these applications go into those buckets that I just built out. And so the solution is going to allow you and your admins to very quickly and easily be able to automate a lot of processes that really come with a lot of administrative burden and busy work, but that are essential to your function. So hopefully that gives you a little bit more of a baseline understanding of what InfoReady can do and kind of how it works. If you would like to see more, please feel free to reach out to us, either to Carlos or to myself. My name, again, is Max Dinerman. My email is max@inforeadycorp.com. That's max@inforeadycorp.com. Thank you again, everyone who stayed and everyone who joined us for the webinar today. And a special thank you to Dan and Sherry for presenting. That was great information, and to Carlos for coordinating here. Okay, we've actually got a couple of questions, so I'm actually going to stay for a few more minutes and answer them. The first question is, can we see what the reviewer sees? Absolutely. So when your reviewers are assigned to proposals or a proposal to review, they'll get an email with kind of a portal to log into the system. They can be external to your institution, they can be internal. It doesn't really matter, but once they log in, they'll have this reviews tab. And so what this is showing me is all of the applications that I, as a reviewer, have been assigned to review, regardless of what competition they're in and regardless of what step they're in. First thing I can do is basically print all these. So if I'm getting on the Amtrak, I want to, red pen these up, I can just download all unreviewed applications as a PDF. Otherwise, I can dig into these applications. So I've just dug into Jane's application here, and what this is going to show me is, you know, if this weren't sample data, there would be application files, pre-proposals, and things over on the right-hand side that I can review. And then it's going to show me whatever the rubric is for the step that I was assigned to. So in this case, it's an approve, do not approve. I just have to enter my my value and then enter any kind of comments, notes that I want to put on there, feedback for the applicant. Then I can either save as a draft or submit my review. If I have a number of proposals to review, I can just keep clicking next and moving through them, and it's going to enforce whatever rubric was created for each proposal. So reviewers really like this because they don't have to keep track of all the rubrics, all the different assignments and protocols and things vis-a-vis specific applications. They just need to scroll through, and they'll be presented with whatever the rubric is for the step that they're assigned. In this case, it happens to be the same one, but this could be a scored rubric, something like that. I can also cross-check the details of the competition to make sure that this application is in line with the RFP, or set a reminder to myself to come back and do it later. Yeah, so to answer a follow-up question that just came in, the proposal and any other kind of files or any kind of reviewable materials that you want the reviewer to see are going to show up here on the right-hand side in their original format, or your reviewer can click PDF and it'll collate those files into one file for me to view on the screen here. And on a per step basis, the admin can set whether or not the reviewer is going to see the demographic information or the identifying information about the applicant as well. So in this case, I'm not allowed to see the identifying information about the applicant, but I would still have access to those files that would live over here on the right. While we're at it, one of the other nice features of the system is the reporting. Because the system's collecting all this data, you know, scores, applications, award decisions, reviews, makes it very easy to aggregate all that data and report on it and kind of sort through it without having to dig through your inbox or dig through spreadsheets or anything like that. So this is our reporting tab, and as a super admin, I have global reporting capabilities, so I can report on everyone's competitions, but the permissions in the system are kind of divided between super admin and admin, and normal admins are only going to be able to see the stuff that they actually manage. So what I can do now is sort and say I want to see, you know, all of my open competitions from the last 90 days, and if I want to further filter and, you know, define what administrators competitions I want to see or what category, I can do that and then refine my results. And then it's going to show me the data set that I've queried along with some kind of heads up data, number of applications, funding available. So if I need to click into the actual opportunity and share it to get more applications, I can do that. And then if I want to download a report of this data that I've just filtered, I just click download report, right? And then it'll spit out a very neat, organized, multi-page CSV that includes the kind of verbatim competition data about the data set that I filtered. I can also report by application. So this tends to be really helpful for folks. If I want to see all of my awarded applications from the last 60 days, let's say, I can refine my results and get those awarded applications in my data set. And then again, I can export those as a report here, as a CSV. Anyway, I don't want to keep you all for too much longer. I appreciate you staying after for this demo. And again, if you'd like to see more, we're going to put my contact info up on screen here. Maybe we won't. My email address is max@inforeadycorp.com. Again, that's max, M-A-X, @inforeadycorp, all one word, .com. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great afternoon.